The Taliban is on Twitter. Welcome back to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. Now that the Taliban have taken control of Afghanistan and all the major cities, including the capital of Kabul, Twitter has made the decision to go ahead and allow two of its representatives from the Taliban to go ahead and post their tweets on the social media giant. Is that a good idea or not? We're here to talk about this is Hasti Afkhami. She is the head of digital for the S3 Group, which is a lobbying and policy organization. Hasti, what do you make of the Twitter decision to allow the Taliban to do this?
You know, it's pretty shocking. Twitter has pretty strict rules on what they allow on the platform and what they don't. They don't like people who incite violence. They don't like people who have derogatory commentary, and that's pretty much all the Taliban do, right? They incite violence. And while the Taliban has tried to change their approach, they still aren't denouncing violence. They're not denouncing people who are supporting the violence that they're perpetuating in Afghanistan. So it's pretty interesting to see why Twitter is using that standard for a lot of other people, but isn't using it for leaders of the Taliban who are clearly using the platform to incite violence and extend their reign of terror.
Well, the Twitter folks say that while the Taliban, of course, is a terrorist organization and the Taliban is doing all sorts of egregious stuff in the streets of Afghanistan as they have in the past, the tweets from the two members of the Taliban seem to be pretty innocuous, just drawing attention to a news conference, congratulating, political leaders. It doesn't seem like there's anything in the tweets themselves. So shouldn't that be the standard? And that is, well, is the tweet itself offensive?
Absolutely. That's a part of it. But when you look at other people that have been banned on Twitter or even on other social networks, but it's specifically on Twitter, they are always banned just for their own tweets. It's if someone that they are supportive of or someone that's related to their organization incites violence and they don't stop it or they don't squash it or they don't say, wait, we don't support that. Right now, there's so much violence going on all over Afghanistan that is at the hands of the Taliban. Videos that have been, substantiated by third parties, and no one from the Taliban, their quote unquote spokesperson, hasn't come forward to say we don't support this violence or we condemn this violence or anything like that. Instead, they are just trying to further their cause and get more people to follow them. The fact that Twitter isn't setting them to the same standard, saying, hey, listen, you need to say that you don't appreciate this violence or that you don't need to support it. It's interesting to see because they've done that to so many other famous people.
Right, and most famously, they did it to President Donald Trump when Donald Trump would say all sorts of outrageous things on Twitter, but the moment that he said, well, the election was invalid or that he would make false claims about the election or he seemed to encourage the January 6th Capitol insurrection, that's when Twitter decided, okay, you're gonna be banned, and Donald Trump remains banned. But again, the argument is that, well, Donald Trump was specifically doing things to either incite violence, to encourage things, or to say things that are flat out wrong. Whereas the Taliban, in terms of how they operate, sure, they may be lying and subjugating women and killing innocent people and engaging in violence, but the message over the social media platform, like their message from the news conference, was, hey, we're just communicating what our point of view is.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Like the Taliban clearly have really upped their social media game. It's interesting to see this regime that perpetuates old traditions using social media so effectively. But the fact that they are trying to perpetuate things that are against Twitter's policies, things against human rights, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, and using Twitter to advance their cause, and yet Twitter isn't stopping them is interesting. Yes, they are not saying go out and kill people using the platform, but those accounts that are supporting of the Taliban, they follow other accounts that do these things. They follow other accounts who say they're Taliban supportive, and those accounts are the ones that are sharing these horrible videos, that are sharing these statements that are inciting violence. And the fact that the Taliban, these specific accounts of Taliban leaders, are following those accounts, and two, aren't saying that these accounts are wrong or that aren't saying that this is something that they don't support, it should be a red flag enough for Twitter based on Twitter's previous standards and previous conduct in this space.
If Twitter had different standards and had acted differently, let's just suppose that Twitter said, you know what, we're not going to be in the business of arbitrating what's truth and what's not, and condoning language or not, and they just said we're going to let everybody use Twitter however they want, no matter what they're doing. If that was what Twitter had done, and they'd allowed Donald Trump, and they'd allowed some of the other Republicans and Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of the other people who would be described as nutballs in the United States Congress who have been banned from Twitter or suspended, if Twitter just said we're going to let everybody use it, would that make a difference in terms of allowing the Taliban to do it, in your estimation?
I think so, right? Because it would be using, there's two different arguments. It's one, how is Twitter conducting its business? In this case, Twitter is conducting its business in a way where they're not using the same standard for everyone. So if we look at it from the stance of how is Twitter conducting its business, then that makes sense. If everyone can say whatever they want, it's their platform. But on the other side, when you look at it as advertisers use Twitter, organizations use Twitter, if that's how they want to use their platform, then organizations should take a hard look and say, you know what, do we want to be associated with a platform that supports these sorts of organizations or these sorts of regimes or these sorts of terrorist groups?
Well, you've hit a really interesting point, and that is a lot of advertisers now have to make that decision, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or other social media, that when they essentially provide a platform for organizations that are involved in killing people and lack of civil rights and humanity, that advertisers have to decide, do we want to be part of this? Do you think that advertisers should now pull back from some of these social media giants because they are giving a platform to the Taliban?
I think it depends on the advertiser. I think it depends on the organization. If you're an organization that really is fighting for human rights or women's rights or democracy, children, anything along these lines, then it is kind of weird to run ads on a platform where your ads could show up next to a tweet from a Taliban leader, right? That doesn't, it feels disconjointed. If you're a consumer company, it really depends on what your values are. It depends on what you feel. But I think that that's something for me and my clients that we would really take into account is where will our ads run and where are we spending our advertising dollars, and do we want to spend them somewhere that doesn't have the same values as our organization?
How important is the credibility of the platform, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or anyone else? How important is that these days to advertisers? And what would advertisers say if all these social media companies just said, you know what, we're just gonna publish everything, and if you want to advertise, great. If you don't want to advertise, that's fine too.
I think the credibility of these platforms is incredibly at risk right now and at stake. I think when advertisers look, where do they want to place their ads? Where do they want to spend their advertising money? Is it on a platform that supports their values? Is it on a platform that has the same standards for everyone? The fact that Twitter isn't holding the same standards when it comes to these sorts of accounts, would they hold the same standards when it comes to what types of ads they're going to approve? How do you know what their business practice is? And so I think to that point, advertisers really are starting to look, especially after Donald Trump's when President Trump was elected, and we saw how much social media was had influence there. I think it's really important for advertisers to look there, and I think more and more of them are. More and more of them are asking harder questions, are asking where are my ads going to show up, who are they going to be a part of, and it's something that you're seeing more and more.
Do you see any upside to having the Taliban on Twitter? And I guess the thought that I have with this is there's some people say, look, you can either try to fight the Taliban everywhere, including on social media, and ban them, or you can invite them to be part of the process and try to guide them and try to get them to be more moderate through their access to something like Twitter. Do you buy that?
No, not at all. I don't think that there's anything that can make the Taliban moderate. These are people who don't believe in basic human rights. They don't believe in women's rights. They kill at whim. There's nothing that can make them moderate, and bringing them into the fold, bringing them as part of the conversation, giving them a seat at the table, talking to them like they should have a seat at the table just empowers them, just gives them more fire to go forward. So I don't think that there's anything that can be done to make these men moderate.
But they have that seat at the table. They have that power anyway right now because they're in control of Afghanistan. They are the de facto leadership government. Is it important that we have some sort of connection, some ability to communicate with them just because of that role that they have in their society?
I think that one of the best parts of social media, something that Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, all of these groups bring about is civil society. And I think the best way that we can support Afghanistan and support bringing, a stable government to Afghanistan is by using the social media platforms, supporting the civil society within Afghanistan. So supporting the women's rights activists, supporting the people who are fighting for democracy. That's the best way to use social media.
Hasti Afkhami, she is in charge of digital for the S3 group. It is a fascinating conversation and a lot of debate, of course, over social media. Hasti, thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that will do it for this edition of The Conversation. On behalf of Asher Cofield and the entire team at the Young Turks, I'm David Schuster. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.